Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today I will analyze the case of Zebb Quinn. First I'll look at the background of this case, move to the timeline of the crime, then offer my analysis. Zebb Wayne Quinn was born on May 12, 1981, and lived in Asheville, North Carolina. This is 2 hours west of Charlotte. When he was 2 years old, his parents separated. Zebb lived with his mother, Denise. Zebb had a learning disability and was described as small and clumsy. He did not have any close friends growing up. At the age of 16, he started working part-time in the electronics department of a Walmart store on Hendersonville Highway. He was also in an ROTC program at his high school. In December 1999, 18-year-old Zebb met a 19-year-old woman named Misty Taylor and became extremely attracted to her. According to Zebb, they talked on the phone for hours at a time. Misty revealed that she had a boyfriend named Wesley Smith and that she had a child, but this did not discourage Zebb. He continued to pursue Misty romantically against the advice of people who knew him. Now moving to the timeline of the crime. On January 3, 2000, Zebb Quinn's mother Denise reported him missing. Here is what the police found during the course of their investigation. One day earlier, on January 2, 2000, Zebb worked a shift at the Walmart store until just after 9 p.m. One of his coworkers was a man named Robert Jason Owens, who went by his middle name Jason. His full-time job was at a Volvo manufacturing facility. He only worked at Walmart part-time. After getting off work, Zebb and Jason had plans to go to the town of Leicester, which is 11 miles from Asheville. The purpose of the trip was to look at a Mitsubishi Eclipse that Zebb was interested in purchasing. He wanted something a little sportier than his Mazda Protege. At 9:15 p.m., a gas station surveillance camera captured Zebb and Jason buying sodas. They drove away with Jason in the lead in his pickup truck and Zebb behind him in his Mazda Protege. According to Jason, Zebb flashed his headlights to signal his desire for Jason to pull over. On the side of the road, Zebb explained to Jason that his pager went off and he needed to return the call. A pager is a small wireless communication device that was popular before cell phones were widespread. A person could call a number linked to the pager and leave a numeric message. The pager would display this, and the owner of the pager could then call the number. Zebb wanted to borrow Jason's cell phone to call the number on the pager, but Jason didn't have one. Instead, he told Zebb about a payphone at a nearby gas station. Zebb drove away and returned 15 minutes later. Presumably he had used the payphone. When he pulled back behind Jason's pickup truck, he ran into it, like the vehicles collided. Zebb was frantic and said he needed to cancel their shopping plans. He would settle up as far as the damage to Jason's pickup truck at a later time. Zebb left the scene in a hurry. Jason claimed that on the next day, January 3, he slammed into a motor vehicle when pulling out of a Waffle House. He went to an urgent care and was treated for a head injury and broken ribs. Jason did not immediately share this information with the police, and there was no record of a collision anywhere near the Waffle House. On January 4, Jason impersonated Zebb and called the Walmart store where they both worked. He said that he was calling in sick. The call was traced to the Volvo facility where Jason worked. When the police confronted him, Jason admitted that he was the one who made the call, but said that Zebb called him that day and requested that he do it. He was just trying to do a favor for Zebb. A few days after Zebb disappeared, the police received information about the mysterious page that he had received on January 2. As it turns out, the call to his pager was placed from the residence of Zebb's aunt, Ina Ustik. This was odd because Ina rarely had contact with Zebb. She told the police that she did not page Zebb on January 2. At the time of the page, she was at the home of a friend named Tamara Taylor, who was Misty Taylor's mother. Again, Misty Taylor was the woman who Zebb was romantically pursuing. Misty's boyfriend Wesley was with them as well. Later, Ina reported to the police that someone had broken into her house on January 2. Nothing was missing, but some picture frames were moved around. The police didn't know what to make of this. Was Ina telling the truth, or did she claim that somebody broke in as a way to explain the call to Zebb's pager? On January 6, 2000, Zebb's mother Denise was contacted by someone who saw Zebb's Mazda protege in the parking lot of a barbecue restaurant. When the police examined the vehicle, they made a few peculiar discoveries. For example, there was a black puppy inside the vehicle. She was later adopted by one of the police officers who was investigating the case. The headlights of the Mazda protege had been left on. Someone had used lipstick, a marker, or a crayon to draw a pair of lips and an exclamation mark on the rear window. There was a plastic hotel keycard inside the vehicle, the origin of which was never determined. The police could not figure out which hotel it came from. And there was a jacket in the vehicle that did not belong to Zebb. Despite all this evidence, the police still did not know what to make of this case. Nothing was bringing clarity. Where was Zebb? Did somebody murder him? If so, who? Did he run off? There was no way to know. Further complicating the matter, the police received a report from a couple who claimed they saw Zebb's vehicle being driven in Asheville prior to its discovery at the barbecue restaurant. They helped the police develop a composite image. The sketch looked a lot like Misty Taylor. The case went cold after this, although the police believed that Jason could have been involved. They kept an eye on him over the years. From 2000 to 2008, Jason had many negative encounters with law enforcement. For example, he was charged with speeding, reckless driving, DUI, resisting arrest, and assaulting an officer. After one incident, he was convicted of speeding to elude arrest and was sentenced to 4 years in prison. The police interviewed him many times about what happened to Zebb, but Jason continued to deny any involvement. He didn't know what happened to Zebb. Over 15 years after Zebb's disappearance, Jason found himself in even more trouble. On March 17, 2015, he was arrested for murdering a husband and his pregnant wife. They were his neighbors. Jason claimed that he accidentally killed them with his vehicle. He was stuck in the mud. They came over to help him. He mistakenly put his vehicle into drive instead of reverse and ran them over. Instead of calling for help, he disposed of their remains. In April 2017, Jason Owens was sentenced to 60 to 75 years in prison in accordance with a plea deal. In July 2017, law enforcement felt as though they had enough evidence to charge Jason in connection with Zebb's homicide. Therefore, Jason was indicted on a charge of first-degree murder. At this point, Jason changed his story. Here is what he told the police. Misty Taylor's boyfriend, Wesley Smith, somehow made contact with Jason's uncle, Walter Owens, who went by the name Gene. Wesley hired Gene to kill Zebb, which is exactly what Gene did. Gene used Jason to lure Zebb to where Zebb was murdered, but Jason didn't know about this in advance. He only assisted his uncle after Zebb was dead. The police were interested in talking to Gene about this, but he died in 2017. The state had doubts about the story that Jason was selling, but they did not have a great case against him. They didn't even know for certain that Zebb had been murdered, because his body had never been recovered. On July 25, 2022, Jason Owens pleaded guilty to accessory after the fact to first-degree murder. He was sentenced to 12 to 15 years to be served concurrently with his 60 to 75-year sentence. No one else has ever been charged in connection with Zebb Quinn's disappearance. Now moving to my analysis. This is a complex case which has led to many different theories about what happened to Zebb Quinn. Essentially, all these theories can be boiled down to just two. Either Jason killed Zebb, with or without Gene's assistance, or there was a larger conspiracy involving people like Misty and Wesley. It's technically possible that Jason was telling the truth, like Gene killed Zebb and Jason didn't know what was happening, but that seems very unlikely. Either way, even if that happened, it did not involve Misty or Wesley. So I will look at these two theories. Jason was involved, or there was a larger conspiracy. To examine these two theories, let's take a look at the evidence both for and against the idea that Jason killed Zebb, starting with the factors that support this theory. By his own admission, Jason was the last person who saw Zebb alive. It was Jason's idea to go look at the Mitsubishi Eclipse on the night of January 2, 2000. His story was that Zebb received a page, became frantic, and left in a hurry. Zebb told everybody about his relationship with Misty, If the page came from her, he would have told Jason. Zebb would not have kept that a secret. On January 3, Jason called in late to work. That same day at 7 a.m., Jason's mother reported him missing to the police. This seems strange that Jason would be missing right after Zebb went missing. Jason went to an urgent care facility to be treated for mysterious injuries. He claimed they were caused by a motor vehicle collision, but there was no record of a collision. On January 4, he impersonated Zebb to call in sick to Walmart. He said that Zebb called him that day. In all likelihood, Zebb was already dead. Jason had an extensive criminal history that eventually included murder. Misty Taylor and Wesley Smith had an alibi for the night of January 2, 2000. They were with Misty's mother, Tamara Taylor, and Zebb's aunt, Ina Eustick. The police were unable to establish any connection between Jason and Wesley. The men did not know each other. How would they have formed a conspiracy to commit murder? Furthermore, Misty and Zebb had only been communicating for a short time. In theory, their relationship was the motive for the murder. This did not leave a lot of time to create a plan. So Jason would have people believe that Wesley quickly arranged the murder. Now moving to the factors supporting the idea of a larger conspiracy, which extended beyond Jason. Zebb Quinn was romantically pursuing Misty Taylor, who had a boyfriend named Wesley Smith. This could have supplied Wesley with a motive to harm Zebb, namely jealousy. On the same night Zebb disappeared, January 2, 2000, Zebb called Misty, but forgot to block his number as he usually did. Realizing that Wesley would now be able to identify him, Zebb said something to the effect of, "I'm in big trouble now." This is consistent with the idea that Zebb was afraid of Wesley. Zebb received a mysterious page on the night he disappeared. It originated from the home of Ina Eustick, an aunt with whom he rarely communicated. Considering how Ina was with Misty, Misty's mother Tamara, and Wesley at Tamara's residence that night, it stands to reason that either Misty or Wesley paged Zebb. Maybe they snuck away from Tamara's residence, somehow made entry into Ina's home, and paged Zebb using her phone. A couple claim they saw a woman driving Zebb's car before the car was found at the barbecue restaurant. Their description was consistent with Misty. Over 22 years after the murder, Jason pleaded guilty to accessory after the fact and implicated Wesley Smith, claiming that Wesley hired Jason's uncle Gene to kill Zebb. When considering all the evidence in this case, do I believe that Jason Owens killed Zebb Quinn? In my opinion, yes, Jason was the killer. He may have had the help of his uncle Gene, but no one else was involved. What do I think happened in this case? This is just a theory, my opinion. On the night of January 2, 2000, Jason murdered Zebb. The motive could have been money, anger, or just plain impulsivity. Jason didn't need much of a reason to engage in criminal activity. Whatever happened, it involved the men fighting with each other, which is how Jason was injured. This is why he went to the urgent care the next day. Not long before the murder, Zebb mentioned how he received a page from Misty. This was probably just a routine page consistent with their romance or whatever was going on between them. Zebb had also mentioned that he was afraid of Wesley. Jason used all this information to create the story about Zebb driving away in a hurry. He was trying to frame Misty and Wesley. When Jason abandoned Zebb's vehicle, he wanted it to be found right away so the police could start pursuing the couple. In order to make the vehicle conspicuous, he left the headlights on, put a puppy inside of it, and drew lips on the rear window. It's also possible that Jason drew the lips because he thought it was suggestive of a woman's involvement. He could have left the hotel key for the same reason. One thing is for certain, Jason was not a sophisticated individual. It's hard to imagine that he involved himself in a complex conspiracy. I think the call to the Walmart store is particularly convincing evidence that Jason was the killer. Again, Zebb was almost certainly dead by this point, so he never called Jason, as Jason claimed. Jason was trying to make it appear as though Zebb was still alive to throw off the timeline. The confusing element of this case was the mysterious page that Zebb received. If that never happened, then Jason's guilt would have been extremely obvious instead of just regular obvious. Jason was able to capitalize on that page to negotiate pleading guilty to a lesser crime. However, he is still going to die in prison for the 2 murders he committed in 2015. This may have been the real reason the plea deal was offered. The state had nothing to lose. Now moving to my final thoughts. A lot of energy has been focused on how Zebb Quinn was involved with Misty Taylor, but the most troublesome relationship he had was actually with Jason Owens. Zebb was trusting, impressionable, and wanted to be accepted. His need to belong overshadowed his instincts of self-preservation. Jason took advantage of this vulnerability and then spent years hiding the truth. Even when he confessed, it was obvious that Jason was still concealing information. He tried to put the blame on somebody else, his Uncle Gene, but his story was not convincing. The plea deal established that Zebb was murdered and that Jason was involved, but it did not fully resolve the mystery of Zebb's disappearance. The true scope of what transpired on that fateful night will never be fully uncovered. Those are my thoughts on the case of Zebb Quinn. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. When looking at the various commentary on the case of Zebb Quinn, a lot of people were critical of the police who handled the investigation, suggesting that they were not sophisticated enough to organize and understand all the evidence. This led them to looking in a lot of different directions when it seems obvious now that Jason was the killer. There's no way to know for certain if Jason was the killer. He never admitted to committing the murder. However, it seems pretty likely that he was. I don't think the police were unsophisticated. I think this was really a matter of not being able to move the evidence around and allocate different values to different pieces of evidence throughout examining the case. Sometimes when looking at a lot of data, an investigator needs to remove a datum. They need to take a single factor out of that data set and see what it looks like with it missing. That one datum could be erroneous, or it could have an innocent explanation. I think in this case, that one datum is the page. That really kind of messed the whole case up for the police. The page was legitimate, it definitely happened, but it had an explanation that did not involve homicide. It doesn't appear as though the police were too interested in that theory. Like they really invested a lot in this page. It really just threw the whole case into a tailspin and made it difficult for them to solve. It can be challenging when looking at a lot of evidence to select different parts and kind of control for them, to factor them out and recalculate. It's also time-consuming. But sometimes that's how the truth is found. Sometimes these little pieces of information that may seem important need to be discounted, even if just temporarily, to get another view of the case. Sometimes that can lead to a lot of clarity very quickly. I think in this case, the page did have an innocent explanation. Maybe that explanation did not come forward because people were scared about admitting it, but I think it was just part of the romance. I think the page was sent by Misty to Zebb to continue whatever they had going on there. It wasn't to lure Zebb into some type of murderous scheme. It was just innocent. And I think that Jason really did an incredible job capitalizing on that. He really threw the investigation off by suggesting that Zebb's mood changed and he ran off in a hurry, and that must explain what happened to him. Really, that page was just a gift to Jason. It allowed him to escape responsibility for a long time. And even when he accepted responsibility, he never confessed to the murder. Again, he said that Gene was the one who committed the murder, and he just helped afterward. Maybe the primary lesson in this case is really about data analysis. It's really about how to look at a complex data set and reconfigure it in many different ways to get different views of it. This is a skill that is challenging and sometimes viewed as unnecessary. Some cases are very simple. But this complex case really highlights the need for complex data analysis.